Okay, so in this video, we are going to talk about some theoretical aspect and then a few questions that you can expect around these topics. Coming to basics, we know indentation matters to the code meaning. Yep. So what does this mean? So we know that indentation in Python is the main aspect where we don't need to have any brackets, but anything that is with an indent is supposed to be a sub-block structure, right? First assignment to a variable creates it, so we don't have to define the type of a variable. Python automatically figures out what type of variable it is. We have equals to and equals to operation. So equals to is assignment and double equals to is comparison. And for numbers, we have plus, minus, multiplication, division, and modulus operations, percentage. So this percentage is also used for formatting a string, right? And plus is also a concatenation operation, which is for strings. We have logical operators and or not symbol, and then the basic for printing is print statement, right? Moving on, we have data types, which are of integers. So it's just a integer number. Floats are again automatically assigned, which is a decimal number. Strings we can declare. We can use a single inverted comma or we can use a double inverted comma, right? And then when we define a string inside triple inverted commas, so this is like a string declaration which has multiple lines, or this at times can also be used as a comment block, so big comment block. And then the fourth type of data is none. So there are four: integer, float, string, none, right? Moving on, white spaces. White spaces is nothing but the indentation that we talked about. So indentation especially used to define block structures. There are no open and closed brackets for it. We just have to indent our code. So if you see here, the first line with less indentation is outside the block. The first line with more indentation this means that it's the starting of a nested block. Now colon start to a new block if any constructs. So this means we have if statement, right? So after every if we give a colon, right? So that is to define that this is a new block. Now, talking about comments, we have to use hash in front of the lines that we want to comment, so that line will be ignored. In PyCharm, we can use control and slash to comment, and then we can have a document string also. So basically, we have to remember we have to use hash for comment and then triple inverted commas if we want to add a document string, right? So if we want to specify what this particular function is doing or what is the output of a final if statement, so we can specify that in a triple inverted commas, and that line will not be rendered in your code, but it would be for the developer to read it to understand what this particular code block is doing. Okay. Next, we have print. Write print statement with open and close round brackets. Then we can directly print a variables inside print statement, which is inside the double quotes, using a curly bracket. To format a string, we have used multiple, but the F string are the easier approach that we have to follow. Now we have slash and slash t, and whenever we try to print something which is of non-string type, Python automatically converts it to a string type and then prints it, right? We have to use comma separated values. If we try to concatenate and print, then we might get some error saying that these type of data cannot be concatenated. Say if you are trying to concatenate a float and a string, it might give you an error. But the best approach is use a comma separated value or use a curly bracket if we have variables, right? Okay. Moving on, naming and keywords. Okay. Now, if we want to name a variable, they can contain letter, numbers, and underscores in Python. And there are some reserved keywords. I'll show you how to get the list of it. Okay. So there are some reserved keywords in Python that we should refrain from renaming. So you cannot rename a variable as break, right? Because break has a different meaning in Python. Okay. It's a reserved keyword. Okay. Now for naming convention in Python, function and method should be named with a joined underscore. Okay, so it should be lower in lowercase and it should be joined using an underscore. And for all constraints, it's the same. And then for class names, you will have to have the beginning of each word should be capital and there shouldn't be any space in it. that is sturdily caps. And then we have attributes like interface or internal, private. This we'll talk about, but just remember this naming convention. Okay, you can refer to this anytime. Then we talked about control structures. We had if, else if, and else statement. True and false have a value of 1 and 0 in Python. We talked about relational operators. This is equals to, not equals to. This is greater than, this is less than, this is greater than equals to, less than equals to. We had logical operator and or not, right? We saw nested if else statement. We had ternary operators. We tried to write a print statement in one single line without having any line breaks in it. But this is only good if you are very well versed or your if complexity is very less. If as and when the complexity increases, better to use the basic if else, right? Okay, so let's talk about few questions that you may expect around it. So how does Python manages memory for a variable, right? Or let me take this up in my PyCharm and then we'll discuss it there, right? Okay, let me open my PyCharm. Not this one, we were on conditional statement, right? Okay. I had another section called comments and questions. Or better, or no, let it be. Or better, I'll take all these questions there on me. I'll create a new file itself, new Python file. Okay, and I'll name it as questions 1. Now we'll use triple colon, hit enter, paste everything here, right? Now, how does Python manages memory for variable, reference counting, and garbage collection, right? So to understand this, let's take example number 1. How does it count? So x equals to 10, let's say x equals to 10, and then I will say y equals to x, right? And then I'll say delete x. So I mean, this happens implicitly, but I'm just trying to explain you through an example. So first, a memory is allocated here. Okay, there is a memory allocation, and then in the next line, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to assign it to y as well. So here, x and y have same reference, right? And when I'm trying to delete here, what I'm doing, I'm just deleting the reference count of 10. So what we have to understand here is I'm not deleting the variable, but I am focusing on the data. Since the data is of same type, Python will automatically point the reference to x, right? Now if I want to print here, print y, okay, and print x, right? What happens if we run this? So I still get a value of y, but my x is nowhere to be found because I deleted it, right? So this is how the Python memory management works using the reference counting. It reduced the reference of x, and when I sent a delete command, it cleared off the memory of x. Now the next one, what is mutable and immutable object in Python, right? So let me give you a reference. Till now what we have talked about is immutable objects. So we have talked about only immutable object, that is integer, string, right? Now there are others also which are mutable. They are mutable data type. They are list, there are dictionary, where are set dictionary and set. We'll talk about this later, but mutable is what? Mutable is something whose value can be changed after creation. Okay, but immutable are something. Immutable are those variables whose value cannot be changed. So every time we want to change a value, a new reference is created for that particular variable. Okay, just understand it this way. We'll talk about this more when we are into this list dictionary set, which is going to be the next topic. We'll talk about this more. Okay. Now, explain the use of equals to and is. How do they differ? How do they differ? Again, equals to, where is it? Yeah. Equals to is used so equals to and is, right? So equals to checks directly for the object's compared value. See, this will check for the compared value, compared values, whereas is will check for object identity. All right, what does this mean? Let me give you an example using a list itself. Okay. We haven't talked about it, but so we define a list using a equals to a, b, c. Okay. Now, or I declared it incorrectly. A equals to 1, 2, 3. A equals to 1, 2, 3. And I'll use the same thing. And paste here and name it as B. Now what we want to check? We want to check print A equals to B, right? And the next one we want to check is print A is B. What will I get? So ideally, if we are checking just for the values, the first one will give me what? True, because the values are same. But if we want to check whether these two objects are pointing to the same address, the answer would be false. Right. Let's run this. Comment this one. Run. True and false, right? Because both A and B have a different memory address. That's the reason they are false, right? Now, how do we swap variables? Now, swapping can happen using a third variable also. The fourth one, this one was question number 3. Next is 4. Swapping, right? A equals to 3, B equals to 5. B equals 5. Then I'll say temp equals A, right? Then I'll say A equals to B and I'll print A and B, right? So temporary. So what I did, I assigned the value of A to 3. So temp is now 3, right? Temp is now 3. Now the value and A is also 3. We have A is equals to, now we have assigned B's value to A, right? So now A is 5, temp is 3 and temp is 3 and B is 5. Now here what we are doing, we are just saying the value of b is now temp. So now the value for b is how much? Value of b is 3. So towards the end, what will it print? It will print a and b, which will be 5 and 3. Correct? Now let's try to run this. 5 and 3. I gave it as 3 and 5, and it printed 5 and 3. So let's write here print values before swap is a and b. And to print this, I want to have one f in front of it, right? Run it. So it says value before swap is 3 and 5. After swap is 5 and 3. Too much complex? No? Simple, right? But here, if I have to print, if I take the same variable, a is 3 and b is 5, print here, right? Now I only want to do b comma a is equals to a comma b, right? So let's take the same thing, print the value here, and this is one line. I'll say values after, right? I'll comment the first part, I'll run it. So before swap the value were 3 and 5, after swap the value is 5 and 3, right? So in Python it's very simple to do a swap without using a third variable also. You just have to swap it you have to just assign it accordingly. Okay, going back to our questions. We were on fourth one. Fifth, why is there no switch case in Python? So it's an inbuilt thing from Python, right? It's an inbuilt thing by Python. They only use if and else. If you want to use a switch statement, you have to modify your code in such a way that if you can use if, or there are other ways where you can either use if else, or else you can use a dictionary plus function to simulate a switch case, right? So I'll take this example when we are done with dictionary objects, but for now just remember we can use if else, if, elif, and else, and dictionary plus function to simulate a switch case. There is no switch case implementation in Python by default. Okay. Now next question is, what are the main reasons why Python is popular compared to other programming languages? Okay, so the main reason here is, first and foremost, should be readability. If you read Python's code, it almost is like normal English, right? Now the second one is the libraries. Python has vast libraries, okay, with every domain, considering data science, web development, AI. So they have already implemented a lot of libraries around it. You just have to pull in, and you should know how to implement these libraries, right? Now the next one that we can mention is the cross-platform compatibility. Cross-platform compatibility. So what it does, you can use Python in any of the OS. It could be Windows, Mac OS, Linux. Okay, you don't have to modify anything. Just install Python, run your code, right? It could be the versatility. Because Python is used in almost all of the technical aspects that you can think about, say it web development, data analysis, automation, machine learning, right? And it is also very easy to program. It is more like English language, basic English language. Now explain how to run a Python script using the terminal. What command would you use to run a file? Example.py. So we had already talked about it, right? Anyone remembers? You just have to write Python in the terminal, Python, and then your file name example.py. Or there can be chances where you have Python 3, so you have to write Python 3 and example.py. Clear? How are the typecasting done? Okay. What are the different data types in Python? How does Python handles type conversion? How does Python handles type conversion? We talked about now, right? We talked about it, right? Data types are integer, float, string, and then Boolean. Then there are collection types, which we are yet to discuss. But I'll write it here. We have integer, string, Boolean, float, none, collection, and in collection we have again list, set, dictionary, and tuples. Right? So these are the data type. And type conversion is again, you have to specify what type of data you want to change it to. Say, let's say A was 3, B was, I'll write it, we don't have to program it, right? I'll write it here only. A was 3, B was 7, and then C is equals to B divided by A, right? Now this will implicitly change the data type of C to float. So what it does, this will implicit change data type to float, right? Now if you want to do it by yourself, when we were trying to take input from a user, by default the type was string, right? We have to change it to either integer or float that we wanted. So let's say I'll say I want it as integer, so I'll write integer of input, and then followed by a string, right? Enter a value, and we'll assign a variable to it. I'll say d equals to this. So d will by default be typecasted as integer because I am specifying as integer here, right? Okay, what does the input function do in Python and how does it store the user's input? So here we just talked about it, right? So this is how it does. I'll just copy paste it here. It will store it as a by default it stores as string data type, right? Okay, how to perform basic arithmetic operations in Python and how is division different from integer division, right? So my division will return, this will return a float. We have already gone through this example, right? This is for float and this will return integer. When this returns float, what it will return? It will return a number 2 point, let's say 5 divided by, or let's say 9 divided by 2. 9 divided by 2 is equals to 4.5, and here I'll say 9 divided by 2 equals to 4, right? So it will automatically perform the floor operations. So this one will automatically perform floor operation and return an integer value. What is the difference between plus for numbers and plus for string? So for integers, plus is addition. For string, plus is concatenation. Right? Now the difference between relational operators and logical operators in Python. Right? What is the difference? Now relational operators, we know what are those. Relational is equals to, not equals to, less than, greater than, right, and others, right? So these. And logical are and or not. What relational is? Relational will compare values, right? Return boolean. Logical, what it will do? Logical will again combine multiple conditions. What is the result of evaluating the following expression? True and false, and why? Right? So what it will give? It will give me a false. We know this because it's a AND operation. Because of AND operation, right? Because of AND operations. And how would you write if else block to check if number is positive, negative, or 0? Right? So let's go to our coding here. Let's do this. Comment this. Reset hash 14. And we'll take, let's say we'll take a user input, right? So let's say n1 equals to, I want it as integer, so I'll write integer and input value to be checked, right? Now next what I want, I'll say if n1 is greater than 0. This means the number is positive, right? Next, if n1 is less than 0, that means the number is negative, right? Next, I'll say if it is not greater than 0 or not less than 0, so it's going to be 0. So I'll say else, I'll say print 0, right? And colon here, right? Now if we run this, what it prints? Enter value to be checked. I'll say 13. It says positive. I'll rerun it. I'll give -9, negative, right? And if I give 0, it gives 0. Okay. And one more concept that we wanted to talk about is the floating point precision, right? Let's talk about what is floating point. Floating point precision. So to explain this, I'll take an example. Let's say x is equals to 1.0, y equals to, let's take a decimal value, 1.1, y is equals to 2.2, right? Now how much this is, total is, my total is 3.3, right? So if I say, I'll comment these two, this is my values, right? Now if I say my x equals to 1.1 plus 2.2, right? And I'll say print is x equals to 3.3. What should it return? It should return true, right? Because it's the same number. But when we pass a number directly to a variable by adding it, there is a decimal precision that Python takes, considering this might not be the same. Okay, if the decimal digits increase somewhere. So if you try to run this, and if you say, let's say what it will give you false, right? Because it's not the same, right? If we want to print the value of x, let's see what it prints. Print x, what it is. So there is a chance that this might end up at 0003. All right. So this is one that can be asked in an interview also. There is one more question. I'll take 2-3 practical questions and then we'll close this. Right. I'll take star in string and int. Right. So let's say a is equals to, I will write as 2 here. Okay. This is an integer, but this is not passed as an integer. It is a string value, right? And I'll say multiply this by 3. Okay. Now what it does? let's first do a typecasting. If I want to get a number output, then what I'll do? I'll say op1, my output 1 is equals to integer component of a plus 2. This is again a string which is multiplied by 3, and then I'm converting it to an integer and adding 2 to it. So what this will do, this will generate an output of 222 because I am multiplying it, right? So string after string after string, right? So this is not integer but instead string. So if I would have passed a, if it was a instead of 2, the output would be what? A, right? But what we did here, we passed it as string, converted it to integer and plus 2. Now what will the output be? It would be 224, right? Let's run this. One. What it prints? Prints 224. Why? Because we have changed this to integer and then added 2 to it, right? Okay. So now if I have to run this, what will it print? It will print false. Why false? Because this will print false, right? This will print false. Why it will print false is because anything that is empty and we are doing a direct check, right? The if statement will evaluate for it falsiness. Okay, kind of falsiness. If at all a variable is there and if it is empty, it is considered as false in Python, right? If you have to check it. Okay, so it will be false. Why false? Because this is anything empty variables are considered as false in Python. Okay, this is all I wanted to talk here, and let's connect on the next lecture. Yep. Thanks for joining, guys.